you all for our training this month. We have a very interesting topic that will affect us all, whether it has in the future or will in the past. This is definitely something to take note of. We are very, I think, fortunate, as you will find, as Matthew explains, to be able to use this technology in the state. And over the next 45 minutes plus, we'll learn the ins and outs of that, and also deal with some law, and which is very important to realize. Like I said, right now we're fortunate to be in a state where we have the laws that we do, but none of us want to be the test case, which makes it a state where we're not allowed to use this technology. So again, welcome. Why? Very nice. Okay, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll hand them over to Matt whenever he wants the questions. Matt, do you want to save them till at the end?
There'll be a spot that will stop briefly for questions, and if there aren't any, we'll do them at the very end.
Very good. All right. Without further ado, Matthew Schultz, please take us away on GPS and the law.
All right, perfect. Well, first I want to thank you guys for coming up today, and for those that aren't here watching this on a recorded training there. All right. Now, first of all, my name is Matthew. My name is Matthew Schultz. I'm the Sergeant of Arms for the Private Investigators Association of Idaho. And this is Following the Trail. We're going to talk about GPS usage and the laws here in Idaho. Along with this, you're going to actually get an opportunity to see what a GPS is, and you'll be able to familiarize yourself with one, and also the concept of what a GPS does. Now, you're going to learn the basics of using a GPS trackers as private investigators here in Idaho, and you'll get to learn the best practices for installing and activation procedures as well. You'll learn a little bit here about how to properly read collected data from a GPS tracker, and also knowledge of what type of information can be gathered from a GPS device as well that can help you with your cases, and an understanding of relevant laws pertaining to GPS usage. It says here in Idaho, but you're going to be surprised when we get to the end about the Idaho law that may or may not affect us as of right now. But you will have some good resources at the end that will tell you about other states in the United States as far as GPSs are concerned. So I am going to put a disclaimer out there. For one, I am not a lawyer. I'm a private investigator like everybody else that should be watching this. And as of the time of this instruction, information provided is current as of today's date, which is the 17th of February, 2023. Now, I do need to be clear. A GPS right off the bat, you cannot use a GPS for evidence of where a person is or where they've gone. The GPS only shows where the device itself has been or where it is. All right, so take that to heart when you're using a GPS here. It's one of the biggest tools that we use, depending on the case that we actually have. Now, you might be wondering what a GPS is. Okay, now GPS actually stands for Global Positioning System. Now, it does go beyond that, right? Because it is a subcategory of the Global Navigation Satellite System, otherwise as we know it as GNSS. Now, it is a general term. It describes any satellite constellation that the U.S. has put up that provides positioning, navigation, and timing, otherwise known as the PNT. And it's on a global or regional basis, depending on where you're using your device. Now, to use a GPS, you need to understand how it actually works. The GPS itself has three components to it, all right, that we need to be aware of, because if one component goes out, it's not going to function properly, all right? And these components, they actually make sure that navigation, timing, and positioning, they come together for you. So you're going to be able to know the time that a GPS is at a location, the GPS itself as to what information it will provide, and the accuracy of navigating to that position. Now, one of the first segments we're going to talk about, and all these we're going to be real brief because this goes to more of the schematics of the way the system works. But you have your space segment. As it sounds, it's everything in space. The controlled segment is the controllers that are earthbound, and we'll get into that in a moment. And then you have your receiver segment, otherwise known as the user segment as well. Now, the space segment that we need to talk about, as of 2022, all right, the U.S. has 31 satellites that actually revolve around the Earth. They're all set in a set orbit, and there's about 12,400 miles up. So they are in space floating around, and each satellite emits a microwave signal. Okay, these signals can be intercepted with solar flares. They can be affected by many different factors when it gets to the ground, as to which the control centers come into play here shortly. Now, each satellite also has built-in atomic clocks, and this is important for us, especially when you have court cases, because that timing is everything when it comes to a case. When you're making your logs, when you're reporting what happened at what time, and pretty much anything that happens that could be an important event. Somebody kills somebody, on the loose end. I don't want to say if that's exciting because it's not, but if something happens, an accident, or you're following somebody and a specific event for your case happens, you need to know the exact time that it does, because that plays a significant role when it comes to your cases. And they are synced with our clocks down here on the Earth. Again, like I said, we're going to go real brief on this part, but we will get into more details how the GPS systems actually work for us in our favor.
Hey, Matt, sorry to interrupt, but your audio is kicking in and out when you move your head. I think it's your headset.
Oh, okay. Let me change that. Thank you.
Or maybe here. Just don't move your head.
Just sit like a robot. All right. Thank you, Pat. Is this better though if I'm just sitting right here?
Much.
Okay. All right. So the control segments that are here on Earth, all right, these are responsible for managing the signal and making sure that all the satellites are functioning properly. Now it is comprised of master stations, backup stations, several different command antennas across the globe. And mind you, this is the system that the U.S. has put up. It doesn't cover anything that the Russians might use or anything like that. But as far as ours are concerned, this is how our system's here. Now they do relay to the receivers on the user end to provide the accurate information, that we receive from the GPS. And here's just a quick little map, just to give you an idea how grand that it actually is, from our master control stations here in the United States, all the way out to Guam, where we have a remote tracking station there. But I'm not going to go into the details on all this, but it is pretty fascinating if you look into it more. Now, the receiver segment, these are the devices that we use on a regular basis, okay? They come in many different sizes, many different platforms that you use, and different types of cases, which we'll go over here in a moment. Now, the most common component of the GPS include smartphones and trackers and day-to-day devices that we use. All right. All sorts of industries use it for tracking of their devices, but also any mechanical equipment that they may have. The military is huge on it, transportation departments, the aviation, and even our own automobiles utilize this. Now, the basic components of this is real simple. All right, they consist of a processor and antenna. Now, the way that this actually works, the antenna in there is what's actually picking up the radio frequencies for you to know where the GPS is at any given time, and the processor will go down and they decode that for you, so you're able to see the information that's provided. Now, this information is not just a location, but it also gives you information on time when this, when a GPS was in a set location. And it's important to note too, if you're going to use a GPS, you got to have good signal, because if you don't have a connection with at least 3 satellites, it's going to be very difficult, and you're going to have a scatter base in regards to where the location of your subject is actually at. Now, it bases location off of time and distance, and that this is a lot of scientific stuff I'm not going to get too much into. But I will say that if you're on clear skies, pure open land, no buildings, tall buildings, or like trees and that, and you're able to get a 4th satellite, you're going to pinpoint it down to the inch for the most part, because the trilateration of it is going to be exact. And it is less accurate if used indoors, and it can cause some bouncing effects. Now, when you're going into using a GPS for the cases, it's important to note, okay, one, how the weather is, that plays a big role when you're using it. The location of the subject is going to be important as well. Now, here in Idaho, I have 6 active GPSs pretty much daily that are out there and going on. Now, these pictures that you see on your screen, this is an example of what can happen depending on the device that you're using. The picture on the left is pretty accurate, and the timing that we have set into these GPSs give us the exact locations every 3 minutes. However, in a location, like if we put a GPS on a vehicle and you have it near the axle or near the wheels, you're going to get the bouncing effect that you're going to see on the right side. And the reason for this is because as they spin, they're causing a magnetic field that's going to intercept with what your GPS is trying to provide for you. So it's important that when we get into here, okay, that we place it correctly. And we'll go over that in a moment as well. But it's important to note the different types of GPSs that are out there. Right off the bat, you have the assisted GPS. All right, it uses local area networks, and that's usually on the smaller GPS units that you have. It's not so much there for satellites, but it'll work off of cellular towers. The triangulation isn't going to be as accurate, and you won't get the data updated immediately when you need it. As to, this is common like in smartphones or something. It helps when the signal is weak or isn't connected to 2 satellites. Now we're going to get into the simultaneous GPSs. This uses both voice data and GPS signaling to be transmitted simultaneously. A lot of the GPSs that we use is going to be falling into this category of the simultaneous GPS, because you want one that gives you data to update you, but also it gives you data to be accurate of its location. And in this, it runs both cellular towers with satellite, and it also has more sensitivity to its movement. It's very useful, obviously, in emergency responders. If you call 911 and an incident happens and you need emergency assistance, you don't know where you're at, they can actually ping you through the cellular towers, which will send off a data to them that they'll know exactly where you're at. Now, and the same goes with the GPS units that we use commonly in the field, that we want that information. So if we change our settings to pull the position, meaning that you want to know right where it's at, it's going to use all the sources possible. Now, the DGPS, all right, you're not going to have much access to that unless you are military or government. And this is important because the Coast Guards use this often in the water. They use it on the shores and the coastal regions here. Now, it has a better sense of location for you, but it's also based like what you see in the movies. They're pinpointing right where something is with the satellites. only not as fancy as what the movies might say. And it does have a 50-foot accuracy, which is really good, and it narrows down the air limit that you're actually at, and most likely is going to be down to the exact inch that you're on. In fact, a few years ago, a test was done. It was the Marines, of all things. They played around with it, and they had put a certain coin that was out in the desert, and they utilized the satellites using the DGPS to narrow down where it was. And since it does work on ground stations, the satellites, the way they bounce it is your distance to the satellite to where the ground station is, making it more accurate. Now, non-differential GPSs, these use direct satellite signals to deduce your positioning here. All right. They're more comprehensive for hikers, people that just want to know, where they're at any given time, or like a direction. I need to go north, like, maybe 50 miles or something. That's all it'll give you on those situations. Now, the type of GPSs that we utilize, they need to come down and give us maps as well. Because having a location, longitude and latitude is great, but knowing where your subject is or the item that you're monitoring is very important. So mapping GPS comes pretty good with a lot of these apps now, and a lot of the devices that you can purchase online. Now, it's found in mobile and other handheld devices, which is pretty beneficial, such as if you have an Android phone. The GPS in an Android phone, for some reason, works better than people that have like iOS, Apple. I'm not sure as to why that works better, but it seems that the navigation is more sensitive to the individual tracking another device. And then non-mapping GPS units, again, this goes to hikers and stuff like that. When they're out and about in the field, they have a directional range to go that'll also give them like how much distance it is, and pretty much an arrow placed on your device depending on the direction you're going. So we can use either one of these systems. It all depends on what type of tracking you're doing with the subject for your case. And depending on how important it is to have the details and landmarks and that, this is something to look out for when you start using a GPS device. Now, an investigator in the GPS, the rule of thumb right off the bat, I'm going to tell you right now, stay away from Apple. Apple AirTags are your enemy. They're easily detected and found with an iPhone. They work with Bluetooth and can actually create a sound when detected. And they literally place an arrow on the iPhone to locate the tag itself. That means that what will happen is somebody with an iPhone will get alerted that there's an AirTag on near them, at least following their course. This is a good feature for them, though, because stalkers are starting to use this, and people that are into human trafficking are starting to use this feature. So it's important to know and be able to let your clients know about this as well, because AirTags can be easily hidden. They can be put in the gas cap. They can be put up underneath somewhere, and if they don't know to search or get the alert set on the device, they could be trafficked by other people. They could be stalked. They can, be found easily. And the way it works, like I said, is on Bluetooth. So we tend to want to stay clear from those, only because we need exact location of what it is that we're following in our field. Now, I do have a quick video. It's short, but it explains the Apple AirTag so you can understand fully why we don't want to use them.
The volume is like,
I'm sorry.
there's no volume really.
Oh. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I do apologize for that. Let me just fix something real quick here. Okay, we'll try. If there's no volume, let me know, and then we can move on. I don't want to just get stuck on that video. All right, here you go. Is that working? Okay. So essentially what it was saying was that it's you'll get an alert as you did. I'm sure you guys saw the alert that popped up, that they will get detected on their phone. So if they have it set on their device, they're going to know they're being followed by an irritant. So we want to tend to stay clear from those. We don't want to use the OBD2 GPSs unless the owner of the vehicle authorizes you to. And what these are GPSs that plug into that little computer slot that mechanics use under your steering wheel. If you have them there, it's easily detected. If somebody literally just looks down, they can see it in most cases. Now, if you use one of these, you're risking a lawsuit for breaking and entering into somebody's property.
Right.
And it's easily detected if you're looking down or maintenance is being conducted. Now, this one is kind of up in the air. You want to stay clear from connected GPS placement. Especially under the hood. And what this means is devices that connect up to the battery, the vehicle battery, or another power source in the vehicle itself. You need to stay clear from and have a self-sufficient battery for the device that you're using. If you need to use a car's battery, don't. And then, of course, follow rule in subsection number 2, because it is easily detected. If somebody goes and raises their hood because their battery's dead or something, they're going to see that device and they can easily trace it back to you if they go through the proper channels. So these are a picture of what I'm talking about. All right, you got your OBD2 ports, GPS units, and the wired GPS. If you got to wire it, it's going to make your job difficult as well, because you can't just remove it quickly, and you risk damaging property as well as breaking and entering into property. So some devices that you can use, okay, and we'll kind of go over it. You want some things that are quick to mount and recover easily. You want to get in and get out as quick as possible when you're placing a device on a vehicle. You want to make sure it's got good battery life. Now, off to the right-hand side, you'll notice there's a tracking. This is a tracking device. They're small. It's efficient. I like it if I'm only going to use it for like a day or two. All right, real simple little device. The battery life does not last on it, especially since when we're tracking people, we want to know where they're at pretty much at any given time. The battery will start draining on it. Now we do have other devices in here. All right. And I stick with Optimus tracking. You got a month-long battery and a 3-week battery. It all depends on how much that you're actually going to utilize this, and also accuracy. Now, the good thing about Tracky is it narrows it down. Even though it uses cellular data, it'll narrow it down pretty good within 50 feet. Optimus, usually 15 feet. Brick House, which is the second picture that you see there with that battery, they're probably, I want to say they're definitely the most expensive unit that I've used. But they have better battery life that can go. You can get batteries that'll last up to 3 months on those. So, but the unit itself is about yay big. So compared to this with the box, you're going to triple the size of what this little box is. So depending on how you're tracking, where your placement is, you want to take a look at this. Again, Tracky Brickhouse Optimus, that's what I personally recommend. You'll have a headache with Tracky at first because you will get mad because of the battery life, but when you learn how to use it, it's actually pretty good. Yeah, Ben, I do see your comment on there about not knowing that about Apple AirTags. But that's why we want to stay clear from them. So if somebody says, "Hey, put an AirTag on a vehicle," I would stay clear because it's going to get found. So the best places to install portable trackers. All right, the most common places that we have is the front bumper, the rear bumper, and underneath the car itself. Now, if you have the owner's permission to put a tracker in the vehicle, and it has to be the owner of the vehicle, then you could put them inside the dashboard, under the carpets, under the seats. But if the driver of that vehicle is a clean freak, they're going to be cleaning under the seats. So I tend to stay clear from that. And same with the carpets. But a dashboard is a good place, and a dome light is a good place, especially the smaller the unit that you get. Now, depending on the type of unit that you get, you'll have things that are this size as well, easily put up into a dome light. All right. But again, don't put it in the vehicle unless you have the owner's permission. And that also goes for those other two devices I told you about, the OEM reader and the one you can hook up to the battery. If you have the owner's permission, go ahead. But now we got to look at understanding the collected data and how we can utilize that to our advantage. Okay, so no matter what GPS unit that you use, you need to be able to have things that'll be efficient for your case and the information readily available. One of the things that we use often, and this is more like for the people concerned about the safety of children. Okay, if they transport the child in there, speed limit comes into play. Location updates always need a location update. But again, I go back to what I said at the beginning with my disclaimer. Just because a GPS is in a location, it doesn't mean the person was in that location. So I can't emphasize that enough. If you get a location update and you're going to claim that as being the individual that you're watching, you better at least try to go out there and get a photo of that person in the video or in the vehicle, or even a video of them in that vehicle. Because if you don't, then that's a case, that's a situation that can get thrown out. But location updates are good though too, because you can also pick up the habits of the individual that you're looking for. I have a semi rule of thumb here in my office that when I get a new case, I know I'm going to be following somebody. I will most likely put a GPS on the vehicle to get a routine for them first, so I know where they're going at any given time. And if I know on Tuesdays and Thursdays they're going to be at a set location, I'll have that address predetermined. So if I know that they're going to be there, I can beat them to the punch. Historical reports, that's where that comes in. History speaks loud, especially when you're working cases like those. And then we have geofences. And we'll get some pictures to kind of show you what these are as well. But geofences are huge, because if you have somebody who's not supposed to go around their wife, okay, because there's a protection order in place, you put a tracker on their vehicle, you see if they go, and a geofence is an invisible barrier around an address that you put up. So if somebody goes in or out of it, you'll get notified and you can start documenting those times, or even respond and get evidence that it's happened. Geofences we usually use for the safety of people. Most recently, I helped James Quintana out with this, with a geofence that was in use to let us know when somebody was coming and going from certain areas as well. Now, speed limits, when you pull up the data, this is huge, because in a case of a child, somebody is going for child custody. They want to say, hey, my spouse is, I know she's driving recklessly or he's driving recklessly. I need proof of that. They only drive on back roads. They're not driving on the freeway. Well, speed limits are going to be huge because you're going to be able to see that as well. See, to confirm the PI can set the geofence setting. Yes. So the question came up real quick to confirm that the PI can set the geofence settings in the tracking software that you have. That is correct. Every tracker that I've ever used, when you sign into their API, the website or their app on your phone, you can absolutely set the geofencing on there. And if they don't have one, I would recommend not using it, that particular GPS, or at least bringing it up to the developer or whoever owns that GPS unit and asking them if there's a way that you can get one on there. And they could probably help you out with that. Now, moving on. Okay, oops. All right, so location updates, same thing. These are actually GPSs I have. If you recognize a street or something, or you might know the area somebody's at, please don't go telling them that I'm showing you this. You don't know if it's them to begin with. My GPSs are identified by their number and serial number. And we'll get into why I do that as well here momentarily. But history reports are huge as well, because you get a history, common locations that people tend to go to. This can help you out significantly for your investigation, depending on what the case is and what it is that you need to pull. Now, geofences, this is an example of what it looks like if the developer has good software. You'll have your geofences set. I have one literally around the outskirts of Boise, but also around certain residences that somebody's not supposed to be within, a certain distance from those residences. So right now, before we continue, are there any questions up to this? All right. I'm not seeing anybody typing either, so we'll go ahead and move on. So GPS tracker, we have an acronym that was given by Chris Swan, and there was a young lady by the name of Sarah Capelli from Inquiry Agency 2021 that came up with an acronym, and I figure that this actually is pretty sufficient, especially when it comes to this particular class that we have going on. So we're going to go over the acronym, kind of explain it as it goes. So the GN GPS tracker, GPS trackers are very useful tools if legally placed. You don't want to attach them to a tailpipe or anything on a vehicle, because the heat will actually cause a lot of damage to the device. Even though you might have a case on it, you don't want to risk that. Now, the passenger side is best to avoid, okay, because you do get Bluetooth interference there. And also be mindful where the spare tire is stored. Now, the spare tire can actually be a benefit too, for a GPS location, because if you reach up and in, as long as they don't blow a tire, you'll be good. I have had a GPS that was found about 6 months ago, because somebody was changing their tire and adjusting like something with the brakes, and they found my GPS unit. They had called 911. The law enforcement officer called me, and a couple minutes later, like not even a half hour actually, he was in my office giving me the GPS back, and we were kind of chuckling about how it got found. And we'll get more into that here shortly. Now, the P in here is pretext with a prop in hand to place or remove the tracker. Pretext is important because no matter what time you're doing it, if you get caught, you need to have a reason to be around that vehicle. Okay, a good example that was used by Sarah Capelli was that you have an object in your hand that you can drop, or maybe carry a leash. Even if you don't have a dog, carry a little leash with you, and then you could just pretend like you lost your pug or something underneath the vehicle, or whatever dog that you want to come up with. Now I see Ben made about the tow hitch frame is a good spot. It is Ben. However, I mean, I have used it on the tow hitch, but if somebody constantly goes camping or pulls a trailer and you put it on a tow hitch, chances are they're going to find it. I mean, it's a good spot, absolutely, if you know that they're not going to do that type of stuff, or they don't have an RV or anything to pull a trailer, then absolutely tow hitches are good. So then we got surveillance went on site for a case. You always want to check the place out before you go running up to a vehicle. Okay, one of the biggest things to run into is a vehicle is going to be on private property. That's where trespass can come in and different things like that. But those laws are in place if there's signs posted any trespass, if there's somebody's private property and they catch you on your property, on their property, we want to stay clear from any of that happening. And that goes for both pulling the GPS and placing it on there, even though sometimes it's difficult to catch them in public, but sometimes you just got to follow them somewhere and then put the GPS on. Now, one of the loopholes that I found to this is most driveways for most residences have a sidewalk that counters the driveway. The sidewalk's a public place. If part of the vehicle is leaning over, but you don't physically step onto the property, put a GPS on there. Police honestly won't do anything if you did not go onto the property. And if you do it right, you're not going to get caught to begin with. But otherwise, out in public places is a real good time to catch it. Now, you want to test the environment. If you're going up to a house at night and you think they might have dogs or cameras, throw a pebble, throw something to make a small little ding or a noise or something on the ground. Listen, if there's no dogs barking, you're safe. Look up and make sure there's no red lights blinking, because that means you're on camera. Might as well smile as you walk up to the vehicle. Now, remember where the tracker is placed. This is huge. If you put a tracker on a vehicle, I don't care how fast that you're going to go in and do it, remember where it's at. Find some way to document it, some way that you can remember. So if you have a team, like I have a team, and sometimes I'll send part of my team out to go recover it, they know where it is because we're keeping notes where we keep the tracker placed. One of the good spots that I actually found, all right, like especially when you're going towards the rear bumper, yes, the exhaust is there, but they usually have a heat shield. If you can get it tucked up underneath that heat shield, it's not going to be found, even if they have the vehicle lifted up. But some cases on vehicles, you're not going to be able to do that because they'll have a complete plastic or fiberglass undercarriage. You cannot find a spot to magnetically stick your GPS. So you'll end up doing something like I had Carolyn Ward do. She's one of my investigators, and she had to tape it up. We used electrical tape and taped it onto the plastic. It was short term, but it worked. And then affixing a spot based on a position where the parked, of the parked vehicle. If you have quick access to pull up and hit the back of the vehicle, do it. Don't waste your time to walk around to the front where you're risking getting seen and have the risk of getting caught. And also consider the time of day. If you go to a Walmart parking lot and somebody's parked in Walmart, there's a lot of traffic, pull your car up, act like you're fixing your car, but actually pop your hand up, stick that magnet up there with the GPS unit. Know the area is going to be huge too. Know if you're going to be seen easily. Know if you place it, that cameras aren't necessarily going to catch you. And then remember, even the best investigator can lose a tracker. I've lost one. I'm sure others have lost one once or twice in their life, but that's where having the reassurance of notes, knowing where your GPS is going to come into play. And the GPS is a resourceful tool to identify a subject's pattern. So remember that this acronym is here, and I think it's pretty good. It's solid, and it makes sense to be able to use it. Now, a lot of the questions come up. Can you get harassment or stalking charged from a GPS? Can they try to charge you for it? Absolutely, they can. Because if you look at Idaho code, okay, and mind you, this is specific to Idaho. Idaho code 187906, stalking in the second degree. Here's how this works. If a person commits a crime of stalking in the second degree, and they get charged for it, if the person knowingly and maliciously engages in a course of conduct that seriously alarms, annoys, or harasses the victim, and as such would cause a reasonable person to substantial emotional distress, or engages in a course of conduct such would be causes a reasonable person to be fear of death or physical injury, in fear of death, physical injury, or family household member. I have never been charged for this. I have had my people found, trying to place a GPS. I have had the GPS found and they tried to come back and charge something. It's not going to happen. If you're doing it professionally, if you're doing it in a course of action that it's working for your case and you have a reason to put a GPS on there, this in most cases will not go. Now, I'm not saying it won't go 100%, but I'm about 95% sure it should be fine. However, be cautious. Okay. The person who you have the GPS on has to prove that at the time the GPS was on there, that they had that stress going on, that they felt harassed. Now, once the GPS is taken off, yes, they may be nervous that they're being followed. Yes, they may feel, hey, I for the rest of my life, I'm traumatized now because, I was followed. Most lawyers will tell you, and please consult a lawyer if you need affirmation of this. It won't go anywhere because during the time of the GPS, it was not affecting. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but from my experience, and this is 20 plus years of experience, this will not affect us really that much. Now, privacy concerns are huge as well. So this is where we're going to get into some meat of some stuff here. So 26 states, including the District of Columbia, have addressed privacy concerns with the use of GPS without the knowledge of the individual being tracked. Of those states, the following have been affected in regards to privacy. So I'm just going to go through this quick for you. All right. Now we have Alaska, Arizona, Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Washington, and Wyoming. They are all starting to address this issue. GPS trackers are being placed, whether it's by private investigators or law enforcement. It's important to note that these laws are constantly changing, but the recent effects that are hitting there is huge. And towards the end, I'm going to have James here post a link for you guys that you can actually see the state's laws in its full effect. In Washington, D.C. right now, prohibitions on location tracking are actually part of the stalking laws. Now, of the other states, it has become prohibited to installing location tracking devices on a vehicle without the owner's consent. These states are Delaware, Illinois, Michigan, Oregon, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wisconsin. And that's huge because you're prohibited without the consent of the owner. And there are states that have laws that more broadly prohibit the use of electronic devices and expand them beyond vehicles. And it's not just in scenarios of stalking, but these states have expanded vocabulary to discuss tracking of someone's movement without their consent. And a very good point that was just brought up here, thank you, Chris, that you should always determine your client's intent before agreeing to place a tracker. And that's a very valid point. One thing I do, and my investigators, they see me do this a lot. My interns see me do this. Is I always do a quick background. The intent is huge. Why are we tracking the individual? But also, with the background done on the individual, you can see if they've had stalking or harassment before, if there's a no protection, if there's a no contact order in place. It's important to actually put that in there. So, Chris, that is very valid. Thank you. Now, the states that have laws that more broadly prohibit the use of electronic devices that go beyond vehicles, it's actually on the person as well. And this could be like little family tracking apps you might have on your watch or your mobile phone with your kids. But California, Florida, Hawaii, Louisiana, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Virginia are starting to take this more serious and being more broad the way they do things. So right now, James, can you go ahead and post that for me? That link, please. The link I'm giving you here that I have James posting is actually a website here that you'll be able to see all the changes that are going on. And if you need me to post it, I can too.
There it is.
Well, no, wait, I don't see the link. Can you touch on company-owned vehicles? Yes, James, I will definitely touch on that as well. But here, let me put the link we needed here. So this link right here is something I found that was actually pretty interesting. It's a national conference of state legislations. And this is a national deal that as laws are being changed, they seem to be posting updates to it quite often. And right now with the states that we just covered, this is where I got the information from. So if you want to look in more details on this, you can. Now, to answer your question there, James, who's allowed to track? So this should answer your question for you. The laws in the books that our states mentioned do have some wiggle room. More importantly, when it comes to the following: lawful use by law enforcement, used by employers in connection with an employee's work, such as Illinois, Rhode Island, and Virginia, used by parent or guardian of minor child's vehicle, such as Delaware, Michigan, and Tennessee, and used by private investigators. Texas and Virginia specifically targets that, and used by legally authorized representative of an incapacitated adult, Virginia. So if you're wondering what that means, that's like somebody who cannot care for themselves, that you are the guardian ad litem per se, or you're taking care of their capabilities for them, knowing, hey, you're going to go for a walk, I'm going to GPS you. Virginia targets that. And used by commercial motor carriers, car manufacturers, fleet vehicle owners, or telematic services. And these states go into more detail, such as Illinois, Louisiana, Rhode Island, and Tennessee. So, James, I hope that answered your question right there. I can't hear you. You're muted. So. All right. So hopefully that does answer your question. Yeah, if you can give me a thumbs up on that.
Actually, there's a question for those a question that some may have for someone that they're tracking and they have a work vehicle that they're allowed to take home, that they maybe sometimes drift off to the girlfriend's house in that case, as far as permissions with the employer.
Right. And that's where the use of commercial motor carriers will come in. Or car manufacturer, vehicle owners, stuff like that. If somebody has a fleet of vehicles in that scenario, the only states that are currently covering that are Illinois, Louisiana, Rhode Island, and Tennessee. There might be more. I'd have to do some more research, but that's what I was able to find for that. So that means that if there's a fleet vehicle somebody's using in this scenario, that the laws do allow for those companies to be able to have it, as long as they have a disclaimer given to them. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and again, for those that didn't want that big long link, I made a tiny URL for you. Again, it's the National Conference of State Legislations. And it's actually pretty good. It doesn't just cover, like the use of mobile tracking devices or anything. It covers a lot of the legislations that are going on right now. And one of the most recent things that we have is the Reno incident, where a private investigator placed a GPS on the mayor of Reno. Our Facebook group, we had it posted, and they are being found that the private investigator was not in the wrong for placing a GPS on the mayor's vehicle, and it was political, however. But he had the rights to be able to do that, even though the mayor wanted to file a, I think, $50,000 lawsuit against him, because she felt it was an invasion of privacy. But because of the fact it was seen where she was going, because there was a political agenda to it, and when he was hired, the law enforcement officers did not find reason to charge him or anything moving forward. Now that might change. I don't know what the progress of it is. This happened, I believe, November of last year, 2022, and it's still something that people are starting to look at, and so we might see some changes happening in that regards as to who can be tracked and who can't be tracked. Now, with investigations laws, okay, we got to be mindful of two amendments. One, the 14th Amendment. Although the 14th Amendment does not contain the word privacy itself, nor does it appear in the rest of the Constitution, the U.S. courts have always, for a very long time, acknowledged the individual's right to privacy in the home and family life. And then you have the Fourth Amendment, which comes into the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. All right. A GPS can be construed as part of a case for legal search and seizure, and we're going to get into that here as well. Now, here in Idaho, one of the biggest things that we had was a court of appeals here in Idaho versus Danny. It happened November 5th of 2010, and the court actually ruled that a police officer, and this is a police officer, can place a GPS on someone's car without getting a warrant if there is probable cause to believe the suspect has committed or is going to commit a crime. And we're just about to wrap up as well here soon. And this was actually based on a couple cases across the United States, such as United States versus Jones, where the Fourth Amendment was being questioned for unreasonable search and seizures and exceeded scope of the use of a GPS. In this case, Jones was a club owner. He was suspected of running drugs and that. And then what ended up happening was the police force, they actually used the GPS on the vehicle longer than what the warrant actually allowed them to do. Then we had Racas versus Illinois, which encounters to the 14th Amendment for reasonable expectations of privacy in public versus home, and challenged the United States versus Jones scenario. Now, this actually separated what your rights are within your home versus being in a public space. And with that being said, one of the biggest issues is, as an example, would be if I follow somebody or if somebody's being followed from their home out to public, anything they do is going to be in the public scrutiny in their eye, compared to if they're at home and a neighbor's looking through the window documenting everything they do. That's their expectation of privacy. And so you got to really look at the differences there. And then last but not least, we have Florida versus Jardines. The situation was a GPS was placed on a vehicle of Jardines, going around finding that he was buying drugs. He got home. The cops came up to the door knocking with a drug dog. The dog gave alert that there were drugs there. And so now came in the question as to whether or not illegal search and seizures came into effect. But that's dealing with the police. We are not law enforcement, but we are investigators acting in the investigative capacity. So the question is, what's the law in Idaho? I gave you a lot of states that had certain laws and different things going on with GPS tracking. But guess what? Idaho is one of the few states that does not have a specific law pertaining to private investigators using GPS.
Yeah.
Generally, as you can see in other states, in order to monitor a vehicle using GPS technology, the consent of one owner of the vehicle is usually required. The closest law that we even have pertaining to GPS is Idaho Code 186707. Okay. Now it can be interpreted that this allows replacement of GPS on a vehicle without a warrant if it's in order to perform a legitimate investigations. I have talked to some lawyers that would argue that private investigators fall within the scope when performing participation of criminal cases, such as if you're working for the attorney, that you should be able to do it. But you must heed the definitions here in Idaho. Now, I'm going to show you the law, but take note to this, that the definition according to Idaho Code 186701, investigative or law enforcement officers means any officer of the state of Idaho who is empowered by law to conduct investigations or to make arrests for offense enumerated. All right. And any attorney authorized by law to prosecute or participate in the prosecution of such offense. Now, the way that the attorneys explained it to me, and mind you, it was 3 different attorneys that told me this information. When we are investigating a case for that attorney, we fall underneath this. But it's kind of tricky though, because that can also be countered because we are not law enforcement. So is there a law? That's still up in the air. And going through here where it talks about the law, this is the part that the lawyers will tell you we technically could fall under, but in my personal view, I don't think we do. Any investigative or law enforcement officer who by means authorized by this chapter has obtained knowledge of electronic communication. Okay. So, and you can look at these codes after this is done as well. Again, it talks about any investigative has obtained knowledge of the contents of electronic communication. And again, any person who has received by any means in the chapter electronic communication while giving testimony under oath or affirmation in any criminal proceeding in any court of the state of the United States or any state in the political subdivision thereof. So when we go to court and we testify that we tracked somebody and we get asked a question, did we place a GPS on there? Yes, there is technically no law that says we can't do it. And there's no law that says we can do it, but this is the closest that I was told that they can technically define us under. Now, with that being said, all right, closing this out, electronic oral communication relating to the offense other than those specified in the order of authorization, all right, that could be used as evidence. One of the questions from Ben I see is, can we bypass this if we work directly for the client, not the attorney? Ben, the answer on, okay, it's kind of iffy. Okay, if you're doing a child custody case, you can still GPS. Technically, the way the law is currently worded and the way the law is, a average person can GPS somebody and get away with it. But if that person finds out, they can press charges against that person for stalking, harassment, intimidation, and everything like that, invasion of privacy. But there seems to be some leniency when it comes to private investigators because there's no law specifically harnessing us that would prevent the use of a GPS. So, it just teeters. And I always recommend consulting with an attorney before if you have any questions regarding it. And speaking of questions, I've taken up about an hour of y'all's time. So are there any questions right now?
I have a question. Do you know currently if there is anything in our state government that any trends toward regulating the GPS usage In Idaho
Nothing.
specific.
Yeah, in Idaho specific right now, I have not seen anything. I've been keeping an eye on the courts, and I've honestly been checking it quite often. At least every 2 weeks, I've been popping in there looking for new cases and doing a lot of appeal cases as well. In regards to GPS, no, there doesn't seem to be any solid movement. However, there has been some news articles, if you Google it, or not news articles, like forums and stuff, and on Reddit, and that people are complaining about GPSs.
Mm.
But whether or not the state will pick that up right now, it's hard to say. But if there is, I can assure you that it will definitely be posted on the NCSL, which is that link that we gave you.
Mhm. Thank you.
It's my
Very
pleasure.
good.
Are there any other
Matthew,
questions?
Hello, it's James. Matthew did an outstanding job on this presentation. So thank you. It was very enjoyable. I think you covered a whole lot of things that need to be covered. How about as far as ethics in conducting this type of of tracking? I know you dealt with the private property and stuff of that nature. Any other tips or problems that you foresee?
Recklessness. If you're going to make it obvious that a GPS is being used, be careful with it. Because I have seen some investigators, they're nervous. Everybody gets nervous about the law. We have a business for a reason. We're investigators for a reason. Placing a GPS on a vehicle is a casual deal. If you put a GPS on there, even if it goes to court and they ask you, how did you follow the individual? Whether you tell them or not you had a GPS, I personally don't until I get asked specifically, did you have a tracking device on? Then I'll say, yes, I did. Otherwise, most of the time, people don't even know. Clients are kind of wishy-washy whether or not I'll let them know if I use a GPS, only because I want them to know I'm doing my job and I don't want them to harass me and cause legal liability. Where are they at right now? What are they doing right now? Where's this? Because again, it goes back to the fact that if you're using a GPS, you don't know if that person is with that GPS or not.
Mhm.
So that's one of the biggest things I would say is not knowing who is actually moving that GPS. Because you can't go to court and say, yes, this is all the logs of the GPS. Cool. Well, how do you know that they are the ones that were moving with the GPS? And it wasn't just somebody else using their vehicle.
Mhm.
And that's why we use it, correct, as a tool. And then if you take off the location on your phone and you have a picture of them while you're tracking them, they'll put you in the same location to prove up that evidence if you need it in court.
Oh, exactly. Because then you have the time, you have the date, time, location, and you can prove it with a picture with your date and time. Or video. Yes. Did that answer your question, James? Hey, are there any other questions for me?
I don't know how much time we have, but I have a case right now, an elder care case, and the client is a family member who wants to put an Apple tracker or a tracker on their elderly relative because of wandering, all the things that come with a declining cognitive abilities. I am wondering whether I can, or whether I should stay out of that decision making on the client's part.
Well, do they have power? They have power of attorney.
No, they do not.
Then I personally would not put anything on the body of an individual.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Unless it's a child and the parents are saying, hey, can you help me put an air tag in the bag or something? Then, okay, then I would use an air tag. Because it's cheaper, it's less expensive, right? But I don't know. I would put the responsibility onto the client
Yeah.
more than anything. You know,
I
you can provide
actually
them with the
don't wanna
device.
talk to them about it. I don't even want to be involved in it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you can always provide them with the device. I have one client that I did give a device to, you know, to track their child.
Mhm,
Here you go. You know, you're going to be solely responsible. You're going to sign a waiver with me that I'm not responsible. You're renting it from me and
mhm.
going from there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I do appreciate you guys for allowing me to do this class, and hopefully it was informative. You know,
Yes.
there's a lot of information, a lot of research in this, and over the last couple of years, we all know that I've been I've been working my butt off to get the info on this. So
Well, thank you. I learned so much. One, I learned a lot about the Apple tracker. And you know, that link you provided is fabulous. And I also loved and I'm going to share it with the newsletter, is the acronym GPS tracker. That is great.
yeah, it's actually pretty good. And Chris, would you mind forwarding that to her so she has it?
The Apple tag? Yeah, no problem.
No, the GPS tracker acronym.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. Of
All
course.
right, thank you. Thank you. All right, again, I want to thank everybody for coming on board here. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and get my interns wrapped up and Carolyn wrapped up because I know she's getting antsy over there. All right, thank you guys for letting me do
All
this.
right.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time. Check your email.
Yeah.